Well, we're looking at a much quieter pattern on this Sunday, getting into the second half of September here. And fall is just about right up on us. And that's just kind of a look back earlier this summer. I guess technically that would be late spring there, June 1st. That was from that trip to Nashville. And landing on a pizza box there in the parking lot. Okay, checking up on Florence. Let's take a look at that. Not much left of it. Got a tropical depression here, winds up to 35 miles an hour, and the pressure 1006 millibars, so that's pretty much just an ordinary garden variety low pressure area now. So that's moving north, heading for eastern Kentucky and West Virginia there, and that's pretty much it. Don't even have a forecast track for that, but let's look at the 5-day tropical weather outlook. This shows us what we can expect over the upcoming week, and we're going to be focusing on the remains of Isaac, and that's taken a very, very long track through the Leeward Islands now, coming up on Jamaica there, and that should be entering the Gulf next week. It'll probably be just another tropical disturbance or tropical depression. I think the likelihood of getting a hurricane out of that is pretty low, especially, you can see they've got 20% chance of formation, so looking at a lot of negative factors for development on that storm. Now, as far as Florence goes, hasn't moved as much as I had thought. I figured by Sunday it would be coming up into Kentucky there. So the past 2 days it's pretty much been sitting there in North Carolina. And the precip shield, of course, on the right side of the storm. Let's take a look at the rainfall totals. These are storm totals going back from last Sunday up until 12Z this morning, so that's going to be about 8 o'clock this morning. And these wide areas, that's 20-inch amounts, so widespread 20s all the way from around the Wilmington area up to about Morehead City, Cherry Point. And some of those 20s have come into the inland areas pretty far. Looks like Raleigh-Durham is sitting on the 5-inch amounts and then getting out into the Asheville and Blue Ridge mountain areas about 1 or 2 inches. So that's good that the heavier precip has not made it too far to the east, but I would expect probably over the next couple of days we'll be making some more progress there. These are the 24-hour precip totals. This is official rain gauge totals, and let's see, I'm trying to get a look at the amounts here. I can see a 5.12 right there around Fayetteville, 7.5 at Wilmington, and then going down the coast, looks like around 3 inches right there on the South Carolina border, and then pretty much widespread 2-inch amounts in northern South Carolina. So I think maybe some of the precip totals are starting to come down a little bit. The circulation of Florence getting pretty well decoupled from the source of moisture there, the Gulf Stream waters and the coastal ocean there. A lot of rain also in Texas with our own tropical depression coming inland. And here and there I see some 2-inch amounts all the way from Dallas to Abilene and down to the San Antonio area. And there's what we have from SPC. Still holding on to a tornado watch right there in North Carolina, adjacent areas of South Carolina there. Actually, I think that is it's a moderate risk. Okay, I don't think... No, we do have a watch out. Okay. Tried clicking on it and I couldn't get anything to come up there. Okay, 2 tornado watch boxes there. So eastern North Carolina there, still under the gun. And let's take a look at the storm reports there. Looks like just 3 reports over the past 24 hours of tornado touchdowns, mostly confined there to North Carolina. And let me see if I can pick up the previous day. So this would be for Saturday there, and yeah, just around the Wilmington area. New Hanover, 2 power line poles down, brief tornado touchdown. and that would be yesterday evening. So it'd be about 7:30 to 9:30 when that happened. Okay, so that's about it for Florence there. We do see the precip shield out there in that region. We'll just take one last look at that before we continue. You can still see the circulation there around the Greenville, Spartanburg area. And off on the right side, that's where we're still pulling in some moisture there from the coastal regions. So that's going to start narrowing out and diminishing as we lose the pressure gradient, and then it should begin its trek into the deep interior there. Okay, upper air patterns looks very similar to what we had last week. So I guess we've probably got a little bit of a blocking pattern in place. Actually it's the same trough there over the northwestern region there. Polar front jet from California up to the Dakotas. That's probably a southern branch right there, and then the northern one running from Oregon up to James Bay there. And a pretty well-defined subtropical ridge all the way from Texas, and that goes all the way up to New York and New England. So east of that ridge, we've got northerly flow coming down through the southern states there. And then as we get closer to the Carolinas, we do start picking up the circulation of Florence. So pick out a little weak upper level low kind of embedded in that pattern there. And then the subtropical high itself, let's see where that's centered. You can see some westerly flow there in Texas coming around to easterly around the San Antonio area. So I think we're looking at high pressure aloft over the San Angelo, Fort Stockton, Midland area. So there it is right there. And any other circulations? I see a little bit of a low pressure area right in here. If I look at the upper level flow, it kind of makes a bit of a curve like that right there. And then you get up to Illinois, it comes around to the north. So yeah, a little upper level low in that area, and of course the one associated with the Florence is in there. Okay, so yeah, if you do kind of dig in there and try to pull out some additional details, you can get a little bit better than just what the blank chart is showing you. So yeah, when you get those charts, definitely try to analyze those, kind of like what I showed you there. Okay, 500 millibar chart showing the upper level low associated with Florence over South Carolina. Similar pattern at 700 millibars there. You can see a little bit more of the subtropical high across the Midwest into the Northeast there. And then at 850 millibars, this is kind of where I'm looking for the moisture. Looks like a little bit of offshore flow in the Central Gulf, and then where we get in proximity to that tropical depression there in Texas, a little bit of onshore flow. Pretty weak coming into the Houston and Austin and Dallas-Fort Worth area there. That brings us to thickness. Looking at the fronts and air masses, looks like we got a warm front across Ontario and a cold front extending southward through Minnesota into South Dakota, maybe down to Nebraska, about like that. And looks like maybe we can track a weak front through the Great Basin area, Utah, Nevada, and looks like we pick up a little bit of a gradient right there in California, so possibly a very weak cold front through the deserts there. And that kind of fits into what we saw on Friday. Looked like certainly a frontal system coming through the western U.S., and it looks like the air mass out in this area has kind of modified a little bit. Same thing with the Canadian air mass. That was definitely in place on Friday. Looked very cold there. It's continued to filter southward, but in the process it's also modified quite a bit, so we don't see quite as much of a thermal gradient up there in Canada. But yeah, the front's still there, and that should be making some progress into the Midwest and Great Lakes area. So that's being driven by this 1030 millibar high up there in Manitoba. Down in the Carolinas, we can see the circulation of Florence right there. And still, there's that pressure gradient I mentioned earlier. And aside from that, just a very weak and broad high pressure area covering that region right there. That's kind of an extension of the Bermuda High. And the precipitable water looks like this, bringing in some much higher amounts into Texas, coming up over 1.5 to 2 inches, and also some pretty good moist advection north of Florence, coming all the way into Kentucky and Tennessee. So let's head to the satellite and do our top-down approach. And I actually got kind of off track there. I was going to set up some sectors and go region by region, but we're just going to have to, I guess, stick with this national picture. There's the remains of the depression coming in up the Rio Grande right there in Texas. Looks a lot drier than what we saw yesterday. A lot of the higher cumulus clouds moving into West Texas, and let's animate that and see what that looks like. So what I'm looking for here is convective development. Yep, a few showers from about Lufkin up to Fort Worth there, and a few more around the Austin and Hill Country area, but the coverage is very weak compared to yesterday. And of course we can see Florence out there in the eastern U.S. And if I roll this up to late afternoon, you can really see the convective elements in there once we get the sun angle a little bit lower. And then over western South Carolina into Georgia, this looks like a lot of stratocumulus. So that's a lot of moisture that doesn't have too much lift associated with that, so we're not seeing much vertical development with that. We'll try taking a look at the Atlanta sounding to get an idea what the air mass looks like on that part of the circulation. So why don't we do that? All right, going to the soundings, we will pull up the 1700Z. Try to get the latest data here. So here comes the Atlanta sounding. And there's the picture that we have right now. I can see one problem that we have is some warm air in the mid-levels. Usually when we are talking about rain showers and thunderstorms, we want a steep lapse rate. That's where the temperature line leans way over to the left like that. But no, it's actually standing up pretty straight there. So if we try to build a parcel there with maybe 77 over 67, we fall on the cold side of that line right there, and that actually gives us negative CAPE. So that's one reason we're not seeing a whole lot of showers there in Georgia. Looks like some warm air aloft. That's probably being deposited by the circulation associated with Florence. You put all that warm air into the top of the storm, and that tends to cap things a little bit. And you can see the westerly flow through a pretty deep layer there. Now, if we go to the east side of the circulation, we're going to probably have a lot of contaminated soundings. We'll try Newport. Yeah, this one looks okay, I guess. Lots of good moisture there, low 70s dew points, and if we get a little bit of lift with that, that's the lifted parcel, and we fall on the other side of the temperature line, so that gives us some positive CAPE. So that's a combination there of a little bit cooler conditions aloft and moist low-level conditions on that side of the storm. Okay, I was going to try to make things a little bit more topical. I was going to try to pick out something that we can discuss and, put in the headline there so things aren't, so dull when things slow down. And I figured we would talk about vorticity, because what I'm going to show you on this GFS chart here, we're going to look out in the Pacific at this pattern out here. You can see this broad area of troughing along the west coast there. So if we roll that forward, we can see a couple of troughs forming, one along the west coast there and one south of the Aleutian Islands. So we roll that a little bit forward, and out in this area here, out there in the Bering Sea, there's this very fast flow and what looks like a very strong jet max coming into that area. So what's happening here? Looks like strong shear in that area, strong jet max, and this is kind of a shot of energy coming through. You can see a little bit of troughing developing with that, and as that gets into the base of the trough, you can see there's some amplification of the pattern, and then that little feature that we saw there descends the base of that trough and starts amplifying the pattern. And you can see it closing off out there about a week from now off the Pacific coast. And then we get a cutoff flow in that area. There's the cutoff flow. And with that, a very amplified pattern developing late next week. So yeah, things will begin interesting. Okay, so why is that important? I wanted to discuss upper level dynamics a bit. So I'm going into my folder here with illustrations, and some of you may have seen this in my books or some of the training, and we're going to focus on this one right here. And these are the divergent and convergent quadrants of the jet max. So we'll kind of keep this simple and not go too much into the technical aspects of this. But this right here is an upper level jet max. So the winds are strongest right in that area right there. And if we were looking at height patterns, we would see height lines kind of, they probably look a little bit like that right there. Now, typically when we have a jet max moving through the flow like that, we tend to see a lot of the stronger upward motion in the left front quadrant. So if you're standing with your back to the wind right at that spot right there, you would see divergence on the left front side, this is on your left towards your front. And with that upper level divergence, you would have upward motion coming from the lower levels to the upper levels. So that's pretty much a given right there. Jet max, upper level divergence. Okay, and then there's another feature that we often look for. And let me see if I can find an example. Yeah, this is a Vorticity Advection Lobe. You've probably seen these on upper level charts. This would be, a shortwave trough moving through the flow right there. So when we have a shortwave trough like that, it's a very small scale trough embedded in the flow. You tend to find a lot of your upward motion on the forward side ahead of the trough, like that right there. Now, if we go back to that previous chart, jet max right there. If we consider vorticity is just kind of a measure of the spin of the air. You will tend to find a lot of your stronger vorticity on your left, right there. So usually we put an X there to notate that stronger vorticity. Let me see if I can find an example in here. Trying to find a good example of an upper level jet with vorticity, and I think I've only got troughs in this directory, but we can kind of see it right here on this illustration right here. It's kind of curved flow. That's not really what I'm looking for, but anyway, this is a jet max right in this area right here. And if you're standing right there with your back to the wind, looking downstream like that, you can see strong vorticity to your left. And out ahead of it, this is your area of upward motion right there. Okay, so that's simple enough. We go to the Advection Lobe right there. If you're standing in the trough, your stronger vorticity is pretty much in the trough, and to your left right there, there's the higher vorticity. So what I'm trying to do when I'm tying this all together is go back to this pattern right here. So you can see the strong jet max coming towards the Aleutians right there. Your stronger vorticity, where's that going to be? Well, it's going to be right in that area right there. And it's also approaching this trough. So the stronger vorticity in this curved flow right there is kind of right in there. So if you kind of put the two together like that, this is kind of an area where higher vorticity is expected, and downstream from that vorticity area is upper level divergence, and we tend to see cyclogenesis in that area. And you can see that that's going to be an area where we're going to favor development of that trough. And that's kind of what happens right there. The trough deepens as that jet max heads into it. And basically the takeaway of that is when you have a very strong jet max coming into the base of a trough, and that's kind of the pattern I'm trying to show you right there, is that moves into the base of the trough, that's going to tend to amplify it. So that's kind of two ways of looking at that. And often the flip side of that is when you have a trough like that and your stronger winds are on the other side of it, moving away from the trough, that will tend to cause the trough to de-amplify and eject out. So basically, if your stronger winds are moving away from that, you're going to see the trough tend to become less deep. And so that'll kind of flatten out, and the wave will just kind of gradually lift up to the northeast like that over time. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of make that a little 5-minute presentation. Those are some things to look for on the upper level charts. And let's put it together and look at the forecast. Okay, for our area, actually I should check chat before I get too sidetracked here. Let me see what's going on in chat. Let's see, we got Carl Berghoff here and Sue M. Thunderstorms arriving from Florence. Erica Baker in Kansas, 85 or 66. JT is here, and Burl H. Adam Davis and Ryan Toomey's there. Got Fun with Tech. Ryan mentioning the impacts of Florence in the Carolinas will be insurmountable. Yeah, with those 15, 20-inch amounts. Cities and townships completely cut off from the outside. I do have a surface map. Let's bring that up, and we can see what's going on in that area right now. I can almost swear that there's some stations missing between Wilmington and the inland areas, like in this area right here. So I wonder if that's due to some telecommunications and power outages in that region there. However, the winds have definitely died off. This has gusts plotted. I see 21 to 22 inch amounts right there. You get up into northwestern North Carolina, looks like 24 to 27. But really, 27 is about as high as I can find on this map. So the winds have definitely died down quite a bit, but everywhere I look in here, there's IFR conditions and heavy rain. So the precip, as detected by the surface network, is pretty much running about like this right here. So it's all moved into western North Carolina, and then in the coastal areas it looks much better, just one isolated rainfall report, another couple around the Wilmington area, and then looks like breaks in the clouds. So yeah, conditions gradually improving in that part of the country. And center of the circulation, let me see if I can find that real quick. Yeah, the wind circulation looks like it's somewhere in that area where we have that cyclonic turning of the winds. And it's pretty much near the lowest pressure, 1006.9 at that station right there. All right, let's see, Atlantic City, 72/65 there from Brett Dean. Already see Tarantula, miserably hot and humid, low 90s out there. Carl Berghoff reporting very warm conditions there in Wisconsin. Got Justin Pulliam here. Carl Berghoff says, please click the like button. Much appreciated. Willie Greenway there in Georgia. And Shirley Keast reporting nice conditions in the western UP. And appreciate that, Burl H. And Shirley Keast. And yeah, that's correct. Sunday and Tuesday and Thursday is when we do the webcast there. So yeah, let's go ahead and finish off the forecast, and we'll look at the upper level pattern once again. This is the continental map from the GFS model, and we'll roll that forward. So already we know that there's a lot of troughing along the west coast, so that usually means things are getting active in that part of the country. There's the first big trough there moving through Nevada on the 19th and 20th. That'll move up into the Dakotas, that very strong ridging holding on across much of the southeastern U.S. Looks like a little bit of that energy starting to approach Texas and New Mexico there as that upper level trough or upper level ridge backs off. And then getting towards the end of next week, upper level high pretty much parked over North Carolina. That puts Texas under kind of a troughy pattern, so we may see precip chances going up in that area. And then we see troughs battering the west coast there. So there they come. They're trying to break down that ridge. Here's a couple more pieces of energy. Obviously, these are jets coming into the base of the trough, so we already know that due to the trough being here, the jets coming down the backside, that's likely going to mean amplification of that trough in deepening. So that would be my first, that's a pretty good piece of trough right there coming into northern California. Very strong upper level lift in North Nevada and the Snake River Valley right there. And another jet max coming down the backside right there. So that's much stronger energy coming down the backside compared to the front side. So this will probably amplify even further. Yep, here it comes right there. So that's rounding the base of the trough. Looks like maybe some early winter storms, maybe in Nevada and Utah. And that'll come through the central Rockies instead of the northern Rockies for a change. And that should come into the central U.S. around the 27th and 28th there. And looks like round 2 coming up there. Very broad, very fast flow through the northern Pacific there. That's probably going to mean this next ridge is going to break down. Yeah, here we go. 1, 2, 3. So things are getting very active towards the end of the month. And then October comes into view here. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, and let's see here. We'll look at the GFS. We'll do the precipitable water since we're still kind of in a warm pattern. And we can see 2 main areas. One over the Carolinas there associated with Florence. There's much higher precipitable water in that area. And also in Texas, 1.5 to 2.5 inch amounts in that area. So going forward over the next week, there goes the remains of Florence across Ohio there. A lot of the precipitable water kind of bound up in the center of that circulation, and then there's still this little lobe here of warm air advection that'll pull up northward into Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania, maybe bring up the precip amounts in that region. And let's see, the next change after that, Let's see what that's going to be. Looks slightly quiet there in Texas, probably reverting to sea breeze type patterns. Get some cyclogenesis there in Nebraska. Looks like the next frontal system moving through that area. And then we get into next weekend. Looks like a front kind of parks down through Oklahoma into Colorado there. So this should be kind of a rainy area over the beginning of next weekend. Probably some MCSs in that region right there, Oklahoma and Kansas. And then we start pulling up the precipitable water once again through the weekend into early next week, a week from now. So looks like it's going to stay kind of a wet pattern there. Polar front still way up to the north, not quite making it down just yet due to the troughing out to the west. Typically when we see that troughing out west, that means southwesterly flow aloft, and that will tend to oppose the progression of cold air coming down from Canada. So that's what's going on right there. Polar front kind of hung up right there in Kansas and Colorado. Looks like we do get one blast coming in on Friday and Saturday, 20th, 29th. And I think if that pans out, it's going to start feeling like fall pretty quickly. And we can see, look at that gradient right there from Arizona, Utah, Wyoming. This is pretty good, pretty deep air mass there. So that's where the front is right there. Not particularly strong in terms of pressure, only 10, 30 millibars, but this does look to be very deep. So that's cold air working its way southward. And that gets towards the very end there, 300 hours out. You can see all that cold air bringing lots of dry conditions southward. And then we start getting a little bit of overrunning in Texas, probably a cloudy period coming up for 30th and 1st. And that's pretty much it there. Okay, well, that's all I've got for this evening. Thank you all for watching. And you all have a good evening, and we will see you again on Tuesday. All right, bye-bye. Have a good weekend, or good work week coming up. Thanks.